One evening, while walking my dog, we came across a small dog standing in the middle of the street, shaking. It had matted hair, mange, fleas, one swollen eye, and mucus nails. It had been walking on its back paws, malnourished and quivering for quite some time. I was shocked. While I was weeding, I called my wife to bring me a blanket and come pick us up. The door to the house in front of us opened, revealing an older man with a shovel. He began calling for the dog to come inside. I completely lost it. I screamed at him, asking if it was his dog, and he said it was. I asked why it was in such bad shape, and he said she was sick and wouldn't eat. I yelled at him, saying there was no way I was going to let him take her back inside. The shouting match lasted long enough for a few neighbors to come outside, one of whom later informed me that he had another dog in the house. Eventually, my wife arrives, and I wrap the dog in the blanket and head home. I looked up the name of our local no-kill shelter, but it was closed until the next day. My wife and I agreed to call her Sally. I bathed Sally and went shopping for wet foods. She would need dry kibble. She devoured it. I set up a comfortable sleeping area in the garage for her to spend the night. First thing in the morning, I took Sally to the shelter and called animal control to report what had happened. They went to check her out, took a statement for me, and then confiscated his other dog. Unfortunately, Sally was euthanized due to her poor condition. She was also extremely old. This is where the revenge begins. The old jerk's house was on the route I used to walk my dog twice daily. My dogs like to take a dump about 2 houses before we get here. Perfect. Now I didn't have to carry bags of garbage all the way back home. I began tossing them onto his roof twice a day. You used to climb a ladder about once a week to get them down, but I eventually broke his will to do so. This continued for about a year before I moved. His house was covered in garbage bags. I also printed out flyers with his address and photos of everyone. I found Sally and placed them in all of the neighbors' mailboxes. Throwing bags of dog poo under his roof is good revenge, but can we get some real justice for Sally? Didn't this old guy get a fine or something? I think it's crazy that someone can mistreat an animal so blatantly and horribly, be confronted by officials, and then just walk away the next day as if nothing happened. I'm not saying this guy needs to go to jail or anything, but shouldn't there be some sort of hang-up about this? Broccoli responded, "Okay, I'm all for shaming animal abusers, but maybe this guy was senile. Perhaps he needs to be placed in protective custody." That being said, the next story is my noisy neighbors. 4 years ago, I had a house built in a new development less than a half hour from my hometown. Initially, it was a dream come true. I was excited to be a new homeowner, but soon after moving in, I became aware of my next-door neighbors. They would constantly throw parties well into the morning hours. The next day, their lawn would be completely covered in trash, which would blow all over the neighborhood. At first, I assumed they were just throwing housewarming parties to get settled in, so I gave them some leeway and let it go. Unfortunately, this was just the beginning. 3 to 4 days a week, that house would make a lot of noise late at night. By this point, I had called the cops numerous times. When they pick up, they simply say they're on their way. I've filed countless HOA complaints, but this keeps happening. On one occasion, they were hosting a children's birthday party in their backyard and used a PA system. Now, I don't live in the countryside. In fact, we're in the city limits, and the houses are fairly close together. Not to mention that the backyards are not particularly large. Why would these people need a PA system of all things? The noise was unbearable. And this time, the entire street filed noise complaints. When the cops arrived and we were speaking with the owners of the noise house, they should have told the cop that they didn't care. Following this incident, I filed another HOA complaint, threatening to take legal action against their company unless they addressed the issue. And as if I said the magic words, they were fined. There hasn't been a party there since. Now for the petty revenge. The guy next door is a construction worker with a grueling weekday schedule. Weekends are his time to unwind. For the previous 4 years, every Saturday I mow my lawn at 6 a.m., beginning on his side. Sometimes I just sit there and relax on my phone for 10 minutes, while the mower runs right outside his bedroom window. Saturday mornings are my favorite part of the week. I'm sure Opie has one of those horrendous old mowers that hasn't had an oil change in 10 years. So when you pull the string 5 times to start the lawnmower, I'm sure it sounds like a nuclear rocket taking off. Growing up, I lived in a hot climate, and my parents always made me mow the lawn. And I was always nervous about when to do it, because if you don't do it in the morning, it's nearly impossible to get yourself out there for more than 5 to 10 minutes. The last thing I wanted to do was start mowing at 7 a.m. and upset any potential neighbors, but that was probably the best time to do it. Practical Rule 855 has been commented. We had this problem years ago. We had a neighbor a block away who would blast music until the early morning hours. Then, 1 year later, it simply stopped. It appears that someone broke into their garage and stole their sound system. I despise thievery, but the perps really helped the neighborhood out. Nomad commented, "Reminds me of the guy with the new vet in the apartment complex. The car's alarm was constantly going off. He came out one morning and found the vet had left, but they had left the alarm in the parking spot." Our next story is Make Me Wait. Turnabout is fair play. This morning started the same way. Any Sunday morning begins with me working. I awoke around 7:20 a.m. I showered until 7:28 a.m. I prepared for the day until 7:40 a.m. I went to the gas station for breakfast, arriving at 7:45 a.m. There may be a slight line at times, but it is not a problem. Everything was going well. Then I get to the line, which has 2 kids in front of me. The cashier rang up all of their items in about 15 seconds. Then, while attempting to think about paying, they answer a phone call, dig through their wallets, insert the card into the machine, remove the card, and reinsert the card. Take the card back out of the machine, put it into the machine, realize it has been working the entire time. During the time I waited behind them, I slowly punched in their debit pin, 1 number per minute. Planets, stars, and possibly galaxies vanished forever. Finally, after 17 eternities, it was my time. All of this took about 45 seconds. What did I do next? I dashed out to my car, noticing the 2 kids in front of me just about to back out. Got in my car. They backed out right in front of them. Normally, I'm in a hurry, but I decided to make a career out of this. Back out. Surely, anyone who decides to watch the convenience store security cameras will witness what can only be described as masterful performance art. Sadly, there was no audience. But if there had been, Albert Einstein would undoubtedly have wept. The 2 chatty kids abruptly stopped talking and stared mouths agape as planets, stars, and possibly even galaxies vanished from the universe above them. After finally freeing myself from my parking spot, I decided to take a leisurely retirement pace down the road before zooming off to my job. Arriving just as the clock turned 8 a.m. Was it Betty? Yes, it was freaky. Was it worth the time? Obviously not. Will I do it again? Until the last stars wink out of a dying universe. See, I enjoy revenge stories like this. But if I were in that position, I'm not sure I'd be able to overcome my apathy and back out so slowly. The universe reaches entropy. Dial preference 664 or 5 brings back fond memories of the film Fried Green Tomatoes, in which Kathy Bates's character has a similar encounter. She does not exact her revenge until the second type of situation occurs, in which someone steals her parking space. She continues to ram into their car while they scream about the incident, and she looks at them and says, "I have better insurance." Also, hello, my name is Steven, and if you enjoy awesome revenge stories, I would appreciate it if you could like or review my podcast. Ben mentioned that our next story will be about noisy neighbors and dog poop. This was approximately 5 years ago. My husband and I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with our young son, He was nearly a year old. The apartment building had 3 levels, and we were on the second. We had young neighbors above us, only 2 people, and they were fine for about a month. Then they started being extremely noisy, stomping, banging, and playing music so loud that you could feel the bass through the ceiling. If you've had a young child, you'll understand how well this went. We used a sound machine to drown out the noise, but it still woke him up and kept us awake. We called the management office about it, and they advised us to try talking to them. When I tried to talk to them, they told me to freak out myself and my infant. They then proceeded to jump down each step in order to make the most noise. After speaking with them, I attempted to speak with management again, and we noticed that the apartment now housed approximately 5 people. Management was unhelpful and told us to call the non-emergency police number. We called several times, and they came over and spoke with them a few times. Finally, one officer, who also had an infant, advised us to fight fire with fire as long as we did not violate any laws. When they made noise, we also made noise. I would bang the broomstick against the ceiling wherever we heard it. We'd play loud music outside their door. This went on for a month, and my husband got tired of them acting like that. He had a petty revenge plan for his noisy neighbors. He determined which car was theirs. It was the loudest vehicle there. He took our dog out for his nightly potty break and returned laughing, and it left dog poop under the car's door handles. He repeated this 2 or 3 times. 2 weeks later, they moved out and we finally got a good night's sleep, so they are extremely annoying. They finally get their revenge when they discover dog poop under their door handles, and they immediately pivot and say, "We're moving out." They don't just try to be good neighbors. Sponge, 67, added, "A friend of mine had downstairs neighbors who would get drunk and fight all night. He tried talking to them, but you can guess what happened. He decided to repay them the next time they went at it. He dropped a microphone from his balcony and recorded them. The next morning, at 7 a.m., he lowered a Bluetooth speaker outside their bedroom window and turned it up loud. It took a few times before they stopped talking." Our next story is deer camp. Setting deer camp, dude joins a nearby hunting club. Dude joins a neighboring hunting club. The rule is that they cannot place a stand within 300 yards of another club member's stand. So dude builds a stand right on the edge of their club's lease, blocking a trail that connects one side of our lease to the other and is 50 yards away from one of our stands. Technically, there is nothing we can do. He's about 10 feet on his club's property and not near any of his other club's stands. We did not want to start a war, so we moved our position away from there. I guess we now have somewhere to dump our gut piles, dead varmints, and, well, last night's meal. Final scene. The hogs destroyed his feeder, and driving past to stand was an excruciating exercise in vomit control thanks to some decaying varmints. As someone who has no interest in hunting, deer stands, or anything similar, I had very little understanding of the complexities of this story. That being said, it's just another classic God person. Good luck with yours. The decal appears to have been commented on. That's really effective. The only thing I was wondering was whether you were being an inconsiderate jerk or simply not paying attention to other people's needs due to his incompetence. Have you spoken to him about this? Our next story is completely free of long distances. Corey. This only happened recently. A woman in a southern state obtained my login information for a big box store via a data breach and attempted to go on a shopping spree. I was able to catch it within 10 minutes of the first order being placed because I am a frequent email checker. I canceled it and removed all payment methods from that account, as well as updating login methods and so on. After filing the police report and knowing how long it would take for something like this to be resolved, I considered what I could do with this woman's full name and address. So I made some assumptions about her political leanings in a southern state and signed her up to receive physical mailers from the DNC, several pro-choice organizations, and LGBTQ+ organizations. ETA for those concerned. I just hounded an unknown victim. I confirmed with the sheriff when I filed the report. She has a history of violations and was foolish enough to give her full name and real address. To be honest. What surprises me the most is that they were the first to obtain Opie's login information as a result of a data breach. Someone is dumb enough to enter their full name and address. I just believe that if it ended up in a data breach like that, someone stupid enough to use their full name and address and just throw it in there would be able to access it. After that account had already been tossed and turned and flipped right over on its head, since her eggs and rice commented, "Sign her up with Scientology and the Mormons, scorched earth, etc." Due to popular demand, as Jehovah's Witnesses and car dealers had razzmatazz, 7,174 commented, "Scientology is ruthless. Even if you move, if you provide a forwarding address, they will find you within 6 months and resume sending you their junk. My boyfriend signed up for their magazine years ago, thinking it was about new science. He was horrified to discover that it was a cult church. It took him years to realize that every time he entered a forwarding address, even if he waited until the last month, It could be done. It would start again. This time, he moved. He didn't include an official forwarding address. He simply updated his address on the websites of the companies he used all the time. It has been 2 years, and counting. No mail. We're hoping that worked. Our next story is about how I came back in my two-faced coworker. So I work in an office where one of my coworkers, Kelly, has always acted like the perfect employee in front of our manager. But now her back is turned. She would slack off, delegate work to others, and be generally unpleasant. She went out of her way to make things difficult for the rest of us. Of course, when our manager was present, she would suddenly become the epitome of efficiency, perfection, and helpfulness. This two-faced behavior began to affect my work because she would pawn off last-minute tasks on me, making me look bad for failing to complete them on time. Meanwhile, Kelly was always praised for staying on top of things. It drove me crazy. I tried calling her out a few times, but she always had a standard excuse or pretended to misunderstand the situation. So I decided that if I couldn't directly confront her, I'd have to do something to make her stumble. Kelly has a habit of presenting herself as the most organized person in the office. She lives for it. Her desk is always clean, and she has color-coded folders for everything. So one day, while she was out on a lunch break, I unintentionally messed up her precious folder system. I did not do anything crazy, just changed a few labels and refiled a couple of documents in the incorrect folders. Not too obvious at first glance, but enough to throw her off. Cue the next meeting, where our manager was reviewing some projects, and Kelly couldn't find the necessary documents when he asked for them. She was visibly upset, so I made an effort to be helpful. Perhaps you misfiled them. She looked like she was about to explode. What is the best part? Our manager looked annoyed at her for the first time, and I could tell it made her feel alive. She spent the rest of the week going through her entire filing system, trying to figure out what went wrong, while I sat back and did my own work without her dumping any more of it on me. Petty. Yep, worth it? Absolutely. I believe it is acceptable to try to knock someone off their high horse when they are clearly misplaced. Kombucha is bad, said Genius, but don't do it again, you'll be caught. Simply refuse to take on any of her tasks. Our next story is that she attempted to plagiarize my work. I went nuclear during my freshman year of university. I had been working on a group project with 4 others. We had completed an experiment as part of a physics module, and each had to write a report of about 2,500 words to be evaluated. The deadline for this module falls right in the middle of a very active few weeks. I made the uncharacteristically organized decision to write and submit my report a few weeks early. The job is done, free to party during varsity week. One of my colleagues left everything to the last minute and called me in a panic. 2 days before the deadline, I asked if I could share my report with her so she could see how to structure it and present the information. I quote, am a little dopey and probably still a little intoxicated from a week of partying, so I'll send her my report the next day. The night before submission, she called again and asked if I could proofread her report and make any minor changes I saw fit before she submitted. I agreed, and she emailed me the document. To my horror, she had essentially copied and pasted my entire report. I couldn't believe she was stupid enough to send me the report to review, given that she had plagiarized it completely. This is where I became vengeful and petty. I first used Word's find and replace function to replace commonly used words from our experiments with vulgarities. I then replaced our experiment's step-by-step methodology with a step-by-step spaghetti bolognese recipe. The data table was replaced with the box scores from the NFL games played that weekend. I took the time to change the author's names and references to Harry Potter characters. For example, Weasley et al. 2009, Dumbledore and Grindelwald, 2008. Finally, I rewrote her conclusion to include a confession that she attempted to plagiarize the report. I sent her the revised document, fully expecting to receive an angry phone call in response. I did receive an angry phone call 3 weeks later, when she was summoned to a faculty meeting for academic misconduct. Apparently, being the dingbat she had not even proofread the document. I had sent her and submitted it. She had not only completed the module, but she was also on the verge of being expelled, as she had inadvertently admitted to attempting plagiarism while blaming me for the document's content. When I returned to the faculty 5 years later as a research fellow, I discovered that the director of teaching had kept a copy of the report and routinely showed it to students as a warning against plagiarism. The OP was friendly enough to send you the full report. They did, so you could change it enough to claim it wasn't plagiarized. But you were such a jerk to send it back to them and say, "Hey, can you just proofread that? Maybe make sure you know it isn't as plagiarized as I did one lab 677 that resulted in this comment." I got the impression she emailed you the report just to ask you to edit it for her because she was too lazy to change it to ensure it wasn't plagiarized. She was too lazy to review the report you sent back to her. Anyway. This next story is about how I made my boss and coworkers possibly eat spoiled food. I've been working in an office for many years, and because I'm the only one who cleans and maintains the space, I finally had enough of no one else helping. Every day, I wash the office cups and cutlery, along with everyone else. I am throwing away garbage, vacuuming, mopping, and cleaning the bathrooms. Finally, I am picking up after everyone as if I were their mother. I do not feel appreciated. Nobody has offered to help. Of course, and I can't stop cleaning because the office will smell. So here's my petty revenge. People have been leaving their snacks out in the kitchen for several days in a row. So right now, we have 10 different snacks available. I used to use rubber bands to properly close the snacks or store them in containers. I discovered a way to preserve them so that they stay fresh for longer, so I stopped doing it. You know what? I don't want to eat any of those snacks, so I'll just leave them out in the open for a few weeks in our extremely hot Mediterranean country. So these snacks have been open for at least a month, and they're still eating them without checking. And they're not bothered at all. However, I know from previous experience that these snacks can produce small, tiny maggots. Oh no, I just gotta say, unless it's in your job description or you're getting paid extra to do it, it's not worth it because people will start assuming that's your job or that's something you want to do, which isn't necessarily something they need to give you credit for or make you feel good about. Just assuming that is the norm. Like, no. PA1823 commented that if it is not in your job description and you are not paid to clean up, you should stop. They may need a reminder that they are adults who must clean up after themselves. Zach's father, 295, commented that my wife used to clean the break room at her workplace. God paid off one day when the place was a complete disaster. After a week, her boss summoned her to his office and asked why she wasn't cleaning the break room anymore. She informed them that it was not her job. He simply assumed it was her job and never bothered to check until she stopped doing it. The worst part was that whenever she went on vacation, there was a rota to keep the room clean, which ended when she returned. Our next story involves a thief stealing items from my pickup bed. A valid reason never to return. Over the last few weeks, I've noticed a few items missing from my truck bed. So I went and spoke with a few neighbors, one of whom told me that he had seen someone lingering around across from my street corner late at night for several days in a row, but didn't seem to care. He didn't steal anything particularly valuable, just my old tarp and some piping bungee cords and straps for securing loads. So it was mostly an annoyance rather than a true loss. So I remembered those viral videos of people using glitter traps or fart spray to retaliate against package thieves and decided to take it a step further in the most disgusting way possible. I looked around for some locked containers that I rarely used and didn't mind getting rid of, and I came across an old toolbox with a partially broken latch and a cheap lockbox that I'd used at garage sales. So I began by taping a note with large words to the leads of both. That read, "I hope this was worthwhile for you, given how much you enjoy stealing my belongings. The next time I needed to urinate instead of using the restroom, I decided to drop a few turds into both containers. Then I locked the cash box, but left a small zip tie in the toolbox and threw some nails and large screws into one of the drawers. So it sounded like there were still tools inside. The next morning, both items were gone, and the dude hadn't been seen in over a week, which I can only assume is because he literally stole 2 boxes of human crap, thinking he had scored something valuable, only to find out that it was far worse than what he had previously taken. I've decided to stop being lazy and move everything from my truck to my house. Also, I'm going to invest in a home surveillance system, but overall I found it quite amusing, and even managed to fit a poop in there. However, I'm glad he didn't take anything of real value. Sure, he got a cheap lockbox and a toolbox that was worth very little due to its condition, but who cares? The guy wanted crap. So I gave him some goddamn crap. I mean, it's a good revenge, but I think I'd just take it as a loss and a lesson to be more cautious with my belongings. That being said, I believe that almost everyone should invest in a home surveillance system. DNA? 6,812 commented that my grandmother became fed up with people stealing gas cans from the shed at her cottage and refilling them with half gas, half sugar water. That one was stolen, and it was the last break-in she experienced. She later discovered that someone on the lake had problems with their chainsaw, boat, motor, and four-wheeler. Weird. Our next story is about a UPS driver and an impatient customer. However, I had delivered to a hospital with 2 loading docks for delivery vehicles. On this particular day, I arrived at an unfortunate hour of the night when both docks were in use, and I had approximately 30 packages to deliver. So I decided to be patient and wait for one to open before I used it. Well, I had been waiting for about 5 to 10 minutes when I noticed one of the other delivery drivers was about to leave. So I put my car in reverse to prepare to take that dock. When he pulled out, this jerk saw me about to reverse into the dock and decided to swoop in and take it before I could get into it. By the way, he's in his personal car. Not a delivery vehicle, but a freaking Prius. When he gets out, I yell, "What are you doing?" You saw me waiting for the dock. He pretended not to hear me and walked into the hospital. So I decide to freak this guy out. I will block his car and unload my packages. He returns a few minutes later while I'm still unloading, and I call him a jerk. He shrugged his shoulders and got into his car. Now I'm really irritated. So after I finish unloading that delivery, I decide to take my hour-long lunch break right here, locking him in his car about 10 minutes in. He knocks on my window, asking what I'm doing because he needs to leave, and I tell him I'm on my break and will be on break for another 50 minutes. He then asks me to move, to which I decline and start laughing. He then begs, apologizing and explaining that he has a job to get to. So I laughed again and announced, "You're going to be late, bud." Then I closed the window and ate my meal in peace in the back of my truck until my break ended. Some of the hospital staff witnessed the entire incident and had a good time watching this guy sit in his Prius, stewing over being blocked. They apparently know that this guy in cities is annoying and has previously been warned not to park in the dock. Just to be clear, my blocking him at this dog did not interfere with any other hospital deliveries. If another delivery truck needed the dock, I would have moved, but fortunately, no other delivery vehicles arrived. I've seen this man several times since the incident, and he no longer parks in the docks. Absolutely deserved. Not only for interfering with the delivery driver, but also for doing such things at a hospital delivery dock. Sanity commented, "This is the petty content I'm looking for. Small but substantial, simple but complicated." I had a tiny one last week while going into a store with heavy doors and Ford, and I later noticed someone behind me. I held the door open for a lady who barged through, bumping me and tutting at the same time. This bothered me, so I called after her, "You are welcome." This caused her to spin around and come at me. I ignored her and went about my business. Shortly after, I was leaving and noticed her heading for the exit. Her arms were full. I lengthened my stride and made it to the door. First, slide through and allow it to close. I heard her squawk of indignation behind me and responded with a single-finger salute. Petty. Our next story involves inviting people behind my back, then becoming stranded. This is a story about my Aunt Kay, who tried to get me to drive and pay for her friends without telling me first. This occurred around 2018. My mother and I were attending a wake for a relative who had died. We were in the Philippines, so the week lasted 2 to 3 weeks. My mother goes first to help set up the week, and I'll go in our car to pick up an elderly relative, Nana. Nana and the deceased relative were sisters, but due to her mobility issues, she is unable to travel. My vehicle is a great help to her. Pick her up, and then we'll board the boat. My schedule is to pick up other relatives first, then Aunt Kay, and finally Nana. The other relatives are unimportant in this case because they were primarily spectators. I've been driving for about 5 hours and asked to pick up Kay. She tells me the location and I wait there for about an hour. We were on time. but I hated having to wait. She arrives with 8 other women, each carrying a backpack and suitcase. My car can seat 8 people, including the driver, plus luggage in the back. Before Kay, there was just me, 3 relatives, and their luggage. I've made sure there's plenty of room for Nana, who needs a wheelchair and 1 person to accompany her. When I ask what she was doing, she says they're ready. I simply stare at her. Consider whether the violence would be physical or verbal. She tells me that she told her female friends she was going on a trip, and then asked if they wanted to go. They all said yes. I'm not sure what else she told them, but apparently I'd be paying for their fare and other expenses, as they kept cooing at me for being so generous. I wasn't pleased with her, primarily because she is portraying this as a fun vacation when it is not. The passengers in the car are unhappy with her, but they must remain silent. Not because they don't want to get involved, but because Kay screams like a banshee when she is told she is wrong. I told her off for expecting me to pay for her gal's vacation, and for disrespecting the nature of our trip. There were so many things I wanted to do and say, but I needed to get away before I did something I'd regret later. Then, petty revenge, so I calmly gave her enough money for the taxi and boat fare, then sped away. I didn't mind paying for everything on the trip, but I wouldn't do it to strangers. I quote, no pushover. She attempted to run after me, but she only made a few steps before giving up. Now you're wondering why I would give her money. It's because I know she'll tell everyone in the family chat about what I did. I would tell them that I had given her money for the trip. Then she would be told that Mustard gave you money, didn't he? So, what's the problem? I picked up Nana, and when she asked where Kay was, I told her everything. Nana only said that she never liked the drunk bench. When I arrived for the week, my mother asked me what had happened, and after I explained myself, she simply went to play cards. She arrived 1 week later. She had a strong desire for money, as she gave her friends what I gave her as an apology. It turns out she didn't bring any other cash with her. She had to pay for her friend's return trip home and then give them some money as an apology. She waited for me for about an hour, expecting me to turn back after her sobbing and whining in the family chat resulted in a verbal RKO. She shared a lengthy video of herself crying on the sidewalk. She gave me the stink eye and benched me in front of everyone she could for an entire week before my funeral. Most people ignored her, so she went to get drunk. Nana enjoyed herself. I cried a lot. She is still alive despite approaching 90, and aside from her mobility issues, she is in good health to this day. Kay refuses to tell me why she thought inviting 8 people without informing me was a good idea. Edit. Nana, isn't my grandmother more of a grandaunt? Nana dislikes Kay because she used to be a heavy drinker and would black out. This occurred at a family reunion. Kay was so drunk and out of it that she got into a fight with another relative. Nana was trying to calm Kay down when she got roped in. Kay instead attacked Nana. Kay was restrained by other relatives and has yet to accept responsibility for her actions. Kay does not appear to drink as much as he did in the past, but others continue to bring it up. You know, when OP described Kay inviting their friends to join them on the trip, I was picturing maybe 2, maybe 3 friends at the end when OP said, "I don't know what happened to them." In thinking that inviting 8 people would be acceptable, I imagined myself to be 8 different people. How did they think they would fit in the car? Surely they knew Nana was going to be in the car, right? Do they really believe they can comfortably accommodate 10 people, let alone all of the other family members who will be present?